Alarms tear through my command deck before I even open my eyes. I am Veker Thren, Fleet Commander of the Kalith Border Watch, and in 22 years of service, I have never heard this particular alarm. It is not the tone for an incoming attack. It is not the tone for a system failure. It is a tone I designed myself, years ago, for a single purpose that I never expected to use. It means something has come out of the rift. I am on my feet before my mind fully understands why. The deck lights shift from soft blue to a pulsing amber, and every officer around me freezes for half a second, the way people do when the impossible interrupts the ordinary. Then training takes over, and hands move across control panels, and voices call out numbers I do not yet understand. Confirm the source, I say, and my voice comes out steadier than I feel. Source confirmed, Commander. It is the old rift, Sector 9, Boundary Marker 4. The one that has been dormant for 40 years. My chest tightens. 40 years. I know that number the way a person knows the date of a loss they never fully processed. 40 years ago, a human survey ship called the Requiem entered that rift while mapping unstable space at the edge of our territory. It never came back. No debris, no signal, no trace. The assembly wrote it off as a tragedy. Humans mourned quietly in their strange, private way, and the rift was marked as a hazard and left alone. Until now. Put the visual on the main display, I order. The image resolves slowly, the sensors struggling to make sense of a shape that should not exist. At first it looks like a smear of light, then a shadow. Then finally a solid outline burns itself into focus. My throat goes dry. It is a ship. The hull design matches old human records, weathered but unmistakable. The Requiem has returned. But that is not what stops my breath. Behind it, the rift is still open, still glowing, and shapes continue to pour out of it. Not one ship, not two. I count until the numbers stop making sense, until the sensor operator beside me whispers a number that should not be possible for any single fleet, let alone one belonging to a species we assumed had spent 40 years grieving a single lost vessel. Commander, the operator says, voice shaking, I am reading over 300 vessels, configuration unknown, power signatures they are far beyond anything in our current registry. I stare at the screen, at ship after ship emerging from a tier in space that was supposed to be empty, supposed to be dead, supposed to be nothing more than a graveyard marker for one lost crew. Every part of my training tells me to sound the general alert, to call for reinforcements, to prepare my sector for the worst outcome my mind can construct. But another part of me, the part that has read every declassified file on the Requiem incident, the part that remembers how young and stubborn and unpredictable humans always seemed even in their infancy among the stars, understands that whatever waited on the other side of that rift did not weaken them. It changed them into something else entirely. Do we open a channel? My communications officer asks, her hands hovering over the console like she is afraid to touch it. I do not answer immediately. I look at the lead ship, at the Requiem, its hull scarred with the marks of decades I cannot account for, its design subtly altered in ways that suggest repair, adaptation, evolution. Whatever happened in that rift, this ship did not sit still and rust. It was rebuilt, improved, carried forward by hands that refused to let it die. Yes, I finally say. Open the channel. All frequencies used in the original assembly registry for human vessels. The static crackles for a moment, and I brace myself for silence, for a trick of instruments, for anything except what actually happens next. A voice answers, calm, measured, almost gentle, in a way that unsettles me more than aggression would have. This is Captain Grace Hallow, of the exploration and defense vessel Requiem, speaking on behalf of the returning fleet of the human diaspora. We acknowledge Kalith border presence. We are not here for conflict. We are here because it is time to come home. The bridge falls into a silence so complete I can hear my own pulse in my ears. Home, she said, home, as if the assembly, as if this entire quadrant of space still belonged to a people who vanished 40 years ago and returned with enough ships to make my sensors struggle for an accurate count. I glance at my second in command, a steady officer named Doran Vess who has served beside me for over a decade. His expression mirrors my own confusion, a mixture of caution and something close to awe. Respond, I tell my communications officer, keeping my voice level even though my thoughts are racing. Tell them we acknowledge their return. Tell them we request they hold position while we notify Assembly Command. The reply comes without hesitation, and there is no anger in it, no impatience, only that same unsettling calm. Understood, Commander. We will hold. We have waited 40 years. A few more hours will not trouble us. I sit back in my chair, staring at the fleet frozen at the mouth of the rift. 300 vessels of unknown design, commanded by descendants of a single lost survey crew. And I feel something I have not felt in a very long time, as an officer of the Calith Border Watch. I feel afraid, not of an attack, not of a weapon, but of the sheer scale of what humanity managed to build while the rest of the galaxy assumed they were gone. I order full sensor sweeps, defensive posture without provocation, and immediate transmission to Assembly Command. Then I do something I rarely allow myself to do during a crisis. I sit in silence for a long moment and simply watch the screen, watch that fleet hang motionless in space like a held breath, and I try to imagine what 40 years must have looked like on the other side of that rift. The reports that come in over the following hour do nothing to calm the tension building across my ship. Every sensor reading confirms the same impossible truth. The vessels are constructed with materials our scanners cannot fully classify. Their energy signatures suggest technology that leaps generations beyond anything currently deployed by the Assembly or any of its member species. And yet, despite holding enough combined firepower to erase my entire border fleet in moments, not a single weapon system powers up. Not a single ship moves out of formation. They simply wait, patient in a way that feels almost more unnerving than aggression would. Commander, Doran says quietly, stepping beside me as I review the data. Do you think this is a trick? Some kind of assembly test, or a scheme by a rival faction to unsettle our sector? I shake my head slowly. No test could fabricate readings like these. No faction has resources close to what we are seeing. This is real, Doran. Whatever happened to that crew, whatever they found beyond the rift, they built an entire civilization capable of returning as a fleet that could challenge the Assembly itself. He is quiet for a moment, processing that thought the same way I am, and they say they come in peace. They say they come home, I correct him. Those are not always the same thing. Before he can respond, my console chimes with a priority message. Assembly Command has received our report and is dispatching a diplomatic envoy along with a security escort, though they are careful to specify that the escort is precautionary and not intended as provocation. I read between the lines easily enough. They are frightened too, and they do not know how to face a returning species whose absence they quietly welcomed 40 years ago. I open a new channel to the Requiem, keeping my tone professional despite the questions burning through my mind. Captain Hallow, this is Commander Vecker Thren. Assembly Command has been notified and is preparing a formal delegation. In the meantime, may I ask a few questions, purely for my own understanding? There is a brief pause before she answers, and when she does, there is a warmth in her voice that catches me off guard. Of course, Commander. I imagine you have many. Your ship, the Requiem, entered that rift 40 years ago with a crew of 12. Your fleet now numbers in the hundreds. Can you tell me what happened on the other side? Her answer comes slowly, carefully, as if she is choosing each word with the weight of history behind it. We found a pocket of space, unlike anything in your Assembly's records. Time moved differently there. What felt to you like 40 years, felt to us like generations. We had no way home, no rescue coming, no guarantee of survival, so we built one. I absorb her words, imagining an entire hidden world, an entire hidden fleet, growing and evolving in isolation, while the rest of the galaxy assumed a single lost ship was nothing more than a sad footnote in an old registry. You built all of this, I say, gesturing needlessly at a screen she cannot see, from a single survey vessel and 12 crew members. We built all of this, she replies, because we had no other choice, and because giving up was never something my ancestors were willing to consider, no matter how impossible their situation seemed. Something about the simplicity of her answer settles into my chest and stays there, heavy and unshakable. I think of every report I have ever read about humanity, about their reputation among the Assembly as young, stubborn, unpredictable, and occasionally reckless. I always assumed those traits made them vulnerable. Watching her fleet hang silently at the edge of the rift, I begin to understand that those same traits may have made them unstoppable. Commander, she continues, her voice softening slightly, I understand this is a lot to process. We are not here to threaten your people or the assembly. We are here because this is still our home, and after everything we endured to survive, we intend to return to it, peacefully if possible, but firmly regardless. Her words settle over the bridge like a quiet warning wrapped in diplomacy, and I realize that whatever happens next, whatever decisions the assembly makes in the coming days, the galaxy that existed yesterday no longer exists today. Humanity did not fade into memory during their 40 years of silence. They multiplied, adapted, and built something powerful enough to make even a battle-hardened Calith commander feel the cold weight of uncertainty settle over her ship. I close the channel and turn to my crew, who are watching me with expressions caught between fear and disbelief. I straighten my shoulders, forcing calm into my voice even though my mind is still spinning with the implications of everything I have just witnessed. Maintain defensive posture, I say. No provocation. We wait for the assembly envoy, and we treat this fleet with the respect its numbers demand, whether we like it or not. As my crew returns to their stations, I glance once more at the main screen, at the Requiem sitting calm and steady at the head of an armada that appeared out of nothing, born from 40 years of struggle, in a place none of us can fully imagine. I think about Grace Hallow's voice, about the quiet certainty in her words, and I understand, with a clarity that chills me more than any alarm ever could, that the galaxy is no longer prepared for what humanity has become. Somewhere behind that calm greeting, behind that patient formation of ships, there is a story of survival I have not yet heard, a story I suspect will change everything the assembly believes about the species it once dismissed as young and fragile. And as I watch the fleet hold its position at the edge of the rift, waiting for a welcome that none of us know how to offer, I realize that this is only the beginning of something far larger than a single lost ship finally coming home. The hours that follow stretch long and tense, filled with reports, updates, and the constant hum of a crew trying to process something none of us were trained to handle. I spend most of that time reviewing sensor data, searching for any hint of aggression hidden beneath the fleet's calm exterior, but I find nothing. No weapons charging. No aggressive maneuvers. Just hundreds of ships holding formation, with a discipline that feels almost unsettling in its perfection. Doran approaches me again, as the assembly envoy's arrival time draws closer, his expression thoughtful rather than anxious now, as though he has spent the last few hours turning the same questions over in his mind that I have. Commander, if their claim is true, if they truly spent decades building this from almost nothing, what does that mean for the rest of us, for the assembly? I consider his question carefully before answering, watching the steady lights of the human fleet on the screen before me. It means we severely underestimated them, Doran. It means the species we quietly wrote off as gone has returned stronger than any of us imagined possible. And it means the next few days will decide whether that strength becomes an ally we desperately need, or a force none of us are prepared to face. He nods slowly, understanding settling into his features. Neither of us speaks again for a long while, both of us simply watching the screen, watching that patient, disciplined fleet wait at the edge of the rift, carrying within it 40 years of hardship, sacrifice, and determination that the galaxy is only now beginning to comprehend. As the first hints of the assembly envoy's arrival appear on long-range sensors, I take a slow breath and prepare myself for what comes next. Whatever happens in the coming meetings, in the coming negotiations, one truth has already settled deep into my mind, unshakable and impossible to ignore. A single human ship vanished 40 years ago, and today, it returned with a fleet capable of reshaping the balance of power across the entire galaxy. And somehow, despite every instinct telling me to be afraid, I find myself desperate to hear the rest of their story. The assembly envoy arrives precisely on schedule. 3 sleek diplomatic vessels flanked by a modest security escort that looks almost embarrassingly small compared to the human fleet still waiting patiently at the rift's edge. I watch the exchange unfold from my bridge, torn between my duty to observe and report, and a growing personal need to understand exactly what kind of civilization could rise from 40 years of isolation to challenge the very foundations of assembly power. Ambassador Lyra Sennett leads the delegation, her voice steady over the comms as she requests permission to board the Requiem directly, bypassing the layers of formal protocol that typically govern first contact situations. Captain Hallow grants the request without hesitation, and I find myself holding my breath as the shuttle carrying the ambassador crosses the distance between two fleets that represent, in this single moment, the old galaxy and whatever is about to replace it. I request permission to observe the meeting remotely, a request granted with surprising ease by both parties, and soon I am watching a live feed from inside the Requiem's central meeting chamber. The room is simple, functional, built for purpose rather than comfort, and it tells me more about the culture that built it than any report ever could. These are not people who spent their exile pursuing luxury. They spent it pursuing survival, and every detail of their ship reflects that singular focus. Captain Hallow greets the ambassador with a firm, respectful nod, her posture calm but unmistakably confident. Ambassador Sennett, thank you for coming personally. I understand this situation is unprecedented, and I want to assure you and the Assembly that our intentions remain peaceful. The ambassador studies her for a long moment before responding, her expression carefully neutral in the way seasoned diplomats train themselves to maintain. Captain, your fleet's sudden appearance has caused significant concern across multiple sectors. Before we discuss intentions, I believe the Assembly deserves an explanation. What happened to your people over these past 40 years? I lean forward instinctively, my attention fully absorbed by the conversation unfolding before me, aware that whatever answer follows will shape the next chapter of galactic history. Captain Hallow takes a slow breath, and for the first time since her fleet's arrival, I see something beneath her calm exterior, a flicker of exhaustion, of weight carried for far too long. When the Requiem entered that rift 40 years ago by your reckoning, we found ourselves trapped in a region of space, unlike anything documented in Assembly records. Time itself behaved differently there. Days for us stretched into what would have been months here. We had no way to signal for help, no way to determine if rescue was even possible, and no guarantee that the rift would ever reopen. She pauses, glancing briefly at the small gathering of her senior officers, standing quietly along the chamber's edges, their expressions solemn, clearly familiar with a story that has become foundational to their identity. We made a choice early on, she continues, to stop waiting for rescue and start building a future instead. We had resources, knowledge, and 12 determined people who refused to let despair define our fate. Over what felt like generations to us, we expanded, we adapted, and eventually we thrived, though not without significant cost along the way. Ambassador Sennett's posture shifts slightly, curiosity beginning to override caution. Generations, you said. Are you suggesting your original crew is no longer alive? Correct, Captain Hallow answers simply. I am a descendant of the original crew, several generations removed. Most of the people serving on this fleet today were born within the pocket dimension we came to call the Hollow, a name chosen not out of despair, but out of respect for the empty space that ultimately gave us everything we needed to survive. The room falls silent for a moment, the weight of her words settling over everyone present, myself included, still watching from the safety of my own bridge, yet feeling as though I am standing in that chamber alongside them. Your technology, the ambassador finally says, changing the subject with visible effort, far surpasses anything currently registered within Assembly systems. How is that possible, for a civilization built entirely in isolation? Captain Hallow allows a small, humorless smile to cross her face. Necessity, Ambassador. We had no allies, no trade routes, no external support. Every advancement we made was born from pure survival instinct. When you cannot rely on anyone else, you learn quickly how to rely entirely on yourselves. That kind of pressure produces results that comfortable civilizations rarely achieve. I find myself nodding slightly at my own console, understanding the truth behind her words in a way that unsettles me deeply. The Assembly, myself included, has grown accustomed to slow, careful progress, built upon centuries of cooperation and shared resources among multiple species. Humanity, isolated and desperate, achieved decades of advancement through sheer necessity and stubborn resolve. And your intentions now, Ambassador Sennett presses gently, though I can hear the underlying tension in her voice, now that you have returned. What exactly do you want from the Assembly? Captain Hallow's expression hardens slightly, though her tone remains measured and calm. We want recognition, Ambassador. Recognition that we are no longer the fragile, uncertain species the Assembly once viewed with quiet dismissal. We want a rightful place among the galaxy's governing powers, one earned through survival, innovation, and sacrifice that few civilizations could endure. We are not here to conquer or dominate. We are here to reclaim our place, peacefully, but without hesitation, should that peace be denied to us. The ambassador studies her carefully, clearly recalculating every assumption she carried into this meeting. That is a significant request, Captain. The Assembly will need time to consider the implications. We understand, Captain Hallow replies evenly. We spent 40 years learning patience the hard way. A little more will not trouble us. But I want to be clear, Ambassador. Our patience does have limits, and our fleet, while here peacefully, is more than capable of defending our right to exist, should that become necessary. I watch the ambassador's posture stiffen slightly at the quiet warning embedded within Captain Hallow's words, though nothing in her tone suggests actual hostility, only firm, unwavering resolve.
It is a delicate balance, one that speaks volumes about the kind of leadership required to guide an isolated civilization through 40 years of uncertainty and hardship.
The meeting continues for another hour, filled with careful diplomatic exchanges, cautious questions, and equally cautious answers. Yet through it all, one truth becomes increasingly clear to me, as I observe from my bridge. Humanity did not simply survive their exile within the Hollow. They transformed themselves into something the galaxy has never encountered before, a civilization built entirely on resilience, innovation, and an unshakable determination to endure no matter the cost. As the meeting draws to a close and Ambassador Sennett prepares to return to her vessel, I find my thoughts lingering on Captain Hallow's final words, on the quiet strength behind her calm demeanor, and on the unsettling realization that the galaxy I have known my entire career is about to change in ways none of us are fully prepared to face. I close the live feed and sit quietly at my station, staring at the steady lights of the human fleet still holding formation at the edge of the rift, and I understand, without a doubt, that this is only the very beginning of a story, far larger and far more complicated than any of us anticipated. Whatever happens next, whatever decisions the Assembly makes in the coming days, one thing remains absolutely certain in my mind. The galaxy underestimated humanity once, and it will not be given the chance to make that same mistake twice. 3 days pass before the Assembly reaches any kind of formal decision, and every hour of that waiting period stretches my nerves thinner than I care to admit. I remain stationed at the border, my ship positioned between the human fleet and the deeper reaches of Calith territory, watching that vast formation hold steady with a discipline that never wavers, never falters, never gives the slightest hint of impatience or aggression. Doran joins me on the bridge during the final hours before the Assembly's response is scheduled to arrive, his expression tight with the same tension I feel settling into my own shoulders. Do you think they will grant recognition, Commander? A full seat among the governing powers is not something the Assembly gives lightly, especially not to a species most delegates still remember as troublesome and unpredictable. I consider his question carefully, my eyes fixed on the steady lights of the Requiem at the head of its fleet. I think the Assembly is more frightened than it wants to admit, Doran. Fear makes decisions faster than logic sometimes does. Whether that fear leads to wisdom or to conflict remains to be seen. Before he can respond, my console chimes with an incoming transmission, not from Assembly Command, but from the Requiem itself. I accept the channel immediately, and Captain Hallow's face appears on my screen for the first time, her features calm, but marked with the kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying responsibility for hundreds of thousands of lives across decades of hardship. Commander Thren, she says, her tone carrying a warmth I did not expect given the gravity of our situation. I wanted to speak with you directly before the Assembly's decision arrives. You have been fair to us since the moment we returned, and I find myself curious about the person behind that fairness. Her request catches me off guard, and I glance briefly at Doran, who offers a small nod of encouragement before quietly stepping back to give us privacy. I simply followed protocol, Captain, nothing more. Perhaps, she replies, a faint smile touching her lips. But protocol does not explain the genuine curiosity I have seen in your questions, or the respect in your tone even when speaking with your own officers about our fleet. That kind of openness is rare, especially from someone raised within a culture that quietly celebrated our disappearance 40 years ago. Her words strike closer to truth than I expected, and I find myself unable to offer an easy denial. You are not wrong, Captain. My people did not mourn your loss the way perhaps we should have. Humanity's presence among the assembly was often viewed as a complication rather than a contribution. And now? She asks, studying me carefully through the screen. What do you think of us now, having seen what we built during our absence? I take a moment before answering, choosing my words with care. Now I think the assembly made a grave mistake underestimating you, and I suspect that mistake is about to become very costly, regardless of how the coming negotiations unfold. She nods slowly, something unreadable passing behind her eyes. That is the most honest answer anyone has given me since our return, Commander. I appreciate it more than you know. Our conversation shifts naturally after that, moving away from formal diplomacy and into something closer to genuine exchange. She tells me fragments of life within the hollow, careful not to reveal strategic details, but generous enough to paint a picture of hardship and resilience that settles deep into my understanding of who these people truly are. She speaks of harsh early years spent rationing resources, of entire generations born never knowing a sky that was not simulated, of children raised on stories about a homeworld most of them would never see with their own eyes, unless the rift somehow reopened. We built festivals around the anniversary of our arrival in the Hollow, she tells me, her voice softening with memory. Not to celebrate being trapped, but to honor how far we had come each year despite it. My grandmother used to say that despair was a luxury we could not afford, and gratitude was a discipline we had to practice every single day, just to keep moving forward. I listen closely, absorbing every detail, and I find myself understanding, more clearly than any official report could convey, exactly how humanity managed to transform isolation into strength. It was not simply technology or resources that carried them through 40 years of exile. It was culture, discipline, and an unshakable refusal to let their circumstances define their identity. You speak of your grandmother, I say gently, curiosity overtaking caution. Was she among the original crew? She was the ship's engineer, Captain Hallow answers, pride evident in her voice. She helped design the very systems that eventually allowed our fleet to expand beyond a single vessel. Without her early innovations, none of what you see today would exist. Her words settle heavily in my chest, and I begin to understand the depth of legacy carried within every ship in that fleet, every soul born and raised within the Hollow, every sacrifice made across generations, simply to ensure survival long enough to one day return home. Our conversation is interrupted by an incoming priority transmission from Assembly Command, and both of our expressions shift immediately back into professional focus. The decision has arrived, I tell her, my voice steady, despite the tension coiling tightly in my chest. Then let us hope 40 years of patience was not spent in vain, she replies evenly, and the channel closes between us. I open the assembly transmission with a mixture of anticipation and dread, and as the delegate's recorded statement begins to play across my bridge, I feel every officer around me lean forward slightly, equally desperate to learn humanity's fate within the galaxy they once called home. The message is formal, careful, filled with diplomatic language designed to soften difficult truths, but the core of it becomes clear within moments. The assembly acknowledges humanity's extraordinary survival and achievement, yet stops short of granting full recognition as a governing power. Instead, they propose a probationary period, an extended series of negotiations and evaluations before any formal seat among the ruling council is considered. I feel my stomach tighten as I imagine Captain Hallow's reaction to such a measured, cautious response after everything her people endured to return home. I open a channel back to the Requiem, uncertain what tone to expect, but Captain Hallow's expression, when it appears, carries no anger, only a quiet, weary acceptance that somehow feels heavier than outright frustration would have been. We expected caution, she says simply, though I admit, part of me hoped 40 years of proven resilience might have earned a slightly warmer welcome. I am sorry, Captain, I say, and I mean it more deeply than I expected to. The Assembly's fear often outweighs its wisdom, especially when faced with something it does not fully understand. She offers a small, tired smile. Fear is a familiar companion to us as well, Commander. We simply learned long ago not to let it dictate our choices. We will accept this probationary period, not because we agree it is deserved, but because patience has always been the price of our survival. Her response carries a quiet dignity that settles deeply into my respect for her and for the people she represents. As our conversation ends and I turn back to my crew, preparing to relay the Assembly's decision through official channels, I find myself reflecting on everything I have learned over these past few days, on the resilience woven into every aspect of humanity's culture, and on the uncertain road that still lies ahead for both our civilizations. Over the following weeks, negotiations continue steadily, filled with careful compromises, cautious trust-building, and the slow, difficult process of integrating an entire returning civilization into a galaxy that spent 40 years assuming they no longer existed. I find myself increasingly involved in these discussions, my initial role as border commander expanding into something closer to a liaison between Assembly Command and the human fleet, a position I did not seek, but one I find myself embracing with growing purpose. Through countless meetings and exchanges, I learn more about the Hollow, about the hardships endured, about the quiet heroes who emerged across generations to guide their people through impossible circumstances. I learn about Nathaniel Cross, an engineer, credited with designing the fleet's earliest expansion vessels, using nothing more than salvaged materials and desperate ingenuity. I learn about Eleanor Voss, a healer whose medical innovations kept entire generations alive despite severe resource shortages during the earliest, harshest years of isolation. Each story adds another layer to my understanding of exactly how deeply humanity's resilience runs, and how foolish the Assembly's earlier dismissal of their potential truly was. Captain Hallow and I continue our conversations regularly throughout this period, our professional exchanges gradually deepening into something resembling genuine friendship, built upon mutual respect and shared curiosity about each other's cultures. She asks me detailed questions about Calith history, about our own struggles and triumphs as a species, and I find myself sharing more openly than I typically would with someone from another civilization, drawn in by her calm sincerity and quiet strength. During one such conversation, held late during a particularly long negotiation cycle, she shares something with me that settles deeply into my understanding of exactly why her people refuse to be broken by isolation. Do you know what kept us going through the hardest years, Commander? It was not hope for rescue. We stopped expecting that fairly early on. It was purpose. Every single person within the Hollow understood that our survival depended entirely on each other, and that understanding created a bond, stronger than any technology we developed. Her words stay with me long after our conversation ends, echoing through my thoughts as I continue navigating the delicate balance between my duties as a Calith officer and my growing personal investment in ensuring humanity's rightful place within the galaxy is ultimately recognized and honored. As weeks turn into months, tensions slowly begin to ease, though they never fully disappear. Certain factions within the Assembly remain deeply suspicious of humanity's rapid technological advancement, fearful of what such capability might mean for the traditional balance of power among established species. Other factions, meanwhile, begin advocating openly for expedited recognition, recognizing the strategic and cultural value humanity's resilience and innovation could bring to the wider Assembly community. I find myself caught increasingly between these opposing viewpoints, my position as liaison placing me directly at the center of debates I never anticipated becoming so personally invested in. Yet through it all, my respect for Captain Hallow and her people only continues to grow, strengthened by every story I hear, every quiet act of dignity I witness, and every reminder of exactly how much strength can emerge from circumstances designed to destroy it. As the probationary period draws closer to its conclusion, tension across the Assembly builds toward a decisive moment, one that I sense will ultimately determine not only humanity's future within the galaxy, but the future balance of power among every species currently navigating the uncertain, rapidly shifting landscape created by their unexpected, extraordinary return. The final week of the probationary period arrives with a tension that I can feel physically in the air aboard my own ship, a heaviness that seems to press against every conversation, every glance exchanged between officers, every quiet moment spent reviewing reports that grow more urgent with each passing day. Something is shifting within the Assembly, something beyond the ordinary friction of political disagreement, and I sense it building long before I understand exactly what it means. Doran brings me the first concerning report during a routine morning briefing, his expression tighter than usual as he places the datapad in front of me. Commander, we are picking up unusual fleet movements from several member species. Nothing officially confirmed, but multiple sectors report increased military activity along their borders with Calith territory. I scan the report quickly, my earlier calm replaced by a sharpening focus as I process the implications. Increased activity toward us specifically, or toward the human fleet stationed within our sector. The human fleet, Commander, he confirms. It appears certain factions within the Assembly have grown impatient with the pace of negotiations, and rumors suggest some delegates are considering a more aggressive approach before the probationary period concludes. My stomach tightens at his words, and I immediately request a secure channel to Captain Hallow, uncertain how much she already knows about the shifting political currents threatening to disrupt months of careful, patient progress. When her image appears on my screen, her expression confirms my worst suspicions before she even speaks. You have heard the reports as well, she says simply, her tone controlled, but carrying an unmistakable edge of concern beneath its surface. I have, I reply. Do you know which factions are involved? Our own intelligence suggests a coalition led primarily by species who view our technological advancement as an existential threat rather than a potential asset. They fear what full recognition might mean for the traditional balance of power, and rather than risk negotiation, some among them appear willing to consider more drastic measures. Her words settle heavily over me, and I find myself gripping the edge of my console as the full weight of the situation becomes clear. Captain, if this coalition decides to act before the probationary period concludes, what will your fleet's response be? She meets my gaze steadily through the screen, and I see none of the fear I might expect, given the gravity of her answer. We did not survive 40 years of isolation, only to be destroyed the moment we finally returned home, Commander. We will defend ourselves if necessary, though we would vastly prefer avoiding conflict altogether. Violence was never our intention, and it remains something we hope desperately to avoid. Her calm resolve does little to ease the tightening knot of worry settling deep in my chest. I know all too well how quickly fear can escalate into aggression among frightened, uncertain factions, and I understand the catastrophic consequences that could follow should any coalition decide to act against a fleet capable of the kind of overwhelming power humanity's ships have demonstrated since their return. I will do everything within my authority to prevent this from escalating, I tell her, my voice firm with determination, despite the uncertainty clouding my thoughts. You have my word, Captain. I believe you, Commander, she replies softly, and I am grateful for it, more than you likely realize. Over the following days, I throw myself entirely into diplomatic efforts, meeting with sympathetic delegates, sharing detailed reports on humanity's peaceful conduct throughout the negotiation period, and doing everything within my power to counter the growing fear driving certain factions toward dangerous, reckless conclusions. Yet despite my efforts, the tension continues building, spreading like a slow fracture across the fragile peace we worked so hard to establish. It is during one particularly tense meeting with Assembly representatives that I first hear direct confirmation of the coalition's intentions from a nervous junior delegate willing to share information off record, driven by his own quiet unease at the direction his superiors seem determined to pursue. He tells me that certain military factions plan to stage a demonstration of force near the human fleet's position, intended to intimidate rather than directly attack, though he admits with visible discomfort that such demonstrations carry significant risk of miscalculation and unintended escalation. I leave that meeting with a cold dread settling deep into my chest, understanding all too clearly how quickly a demonstration meant to intimidate could spiral into something far more catastrophic, given the sheer scale of firepower present on both sides of an already fragile standoff. I contact Captain Hallow immediately, sharing what I have learned, and her expression grows visibly troubled despite her continued composure. A demonstration of force, she repeats slowly, processing the implications. Commander, do you understand what kind of risk that presents? My people spent 40 years surviving in a hostile, unforgiving environment. Instinctive caution runs deep within our culture, deeper than most outsiders realize. If ships approach our fleet with weapons active, Even without direct hostile intent, the risk of unintended confrontation increases significantly. I understand, Captain, I reply, my voice tight with genuine concern. I am doing everything within my power to prevent this from happening, but I fear certain factions have grown too fearful, too impatient, to be easily reasoned with at this point. She is quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant, as she considers our situation carefully. Then perhaps it is time for a different approach, Commander. Instead of quiet diplomacy behind closed doors, perhaps it is time for the Assembly to witness directly and clearly exactly what our people are capable of, not through aggression, but through undeniable strength, paired with unwavering restraint. You are suggesting a demonstration of your own. Not an attack, she clarifies quickly. Simply a clear, unmistakable display of exactly what awaits any faction foolish enough to test our patience, paired with a renewed, public commitment to peace, should that patience be respected in return. I consider her proposal carefully, weighing the risks against the potential benefits, before ultimately agreeing to help coordinate a response that balances strength with diplomacy, hoping desperately that such a delicate approach might be enough to prevent catastrophe before it has the chance to unfold. Over the following 2 days, careful arrangements are made, secure channels established, and eventually a moment arrives where representatives from every major assembly faction, including those most vocally opposed to humanity's recognition, gather remotely to witness a carefully orchestrated demonstration coordinated between myself, Captain Hallow, and several cautiously supportive assembly delegates who understand the catastrophic stakes should this situation spiral further out of control. I watch from my own bridge as the human fleet shifts formation with a precision that leaves even my most experienced officers visibly stunned. 300 vessels moving in perfect, disciplined unity, showcasing capabilities far beyond anything previously demonstrated during the months since their return. Yet not a single weapon is fired, not a single aggressive maneuver executed. It is a display of pure, controlled power, paired with absolute restraint, a message delivered without violence, yet impossible to misunderstand. Captain Hallow's voice follows the demonstration, broadcast across every channel monitoring the event, calm and measured despite the weight of the moment. This is what patience paired with strength looks like. We do not wish for conflict. We never have, but we will not be intimidated into submission after everything our people endured to survive and ultimately return home. We ask the Assembly to choose wisdom over fear, cooperation over conflict, and partnership over needless, costly confrontation. The silence that follows her broadcast stretches long and heavy across every monitoring channel, and I find myself holding my breath, uncertain how the assembled factions will ultimately respond to such an undeniable display of controlled, disciplined power. It is Ambassador Sennett who finally breaks the silence, her voice carrying renewed authority as she addresses the assembled delegates directly. I believe we have received our answer regarding the wisdom of provoking this fleet unnecessarily. I move that we accelerate the recognition process, granting humanity provisional status among the Governing Council effective immediately, with full evaluation to continue as previously agreed, but without further risk of unnecessary escalation. The proposal passes with surprising speed, fear and respect combining to override the lingering suspicion held by certain factions, and within hours, an official announcement confirms humanity's provisional recognition as a governing power within the Assembly, a milestone achieved not through conflict, but through a careful, delicate balance of strength and diplomacy that I played no small part in helping to orchestrate. I contact Captain Hallow immediately following the announcement, relief washing over me, as I finally allow myself to fully process everything that has unfolded over these tense, uncertain days. You did it, Captain. Provisional recognition, effective immediately. Her expression, when it appears on my screen, carries a depth of emotion I have not seen from her since our very first conversation. Exhaustion, mixed with quiet, hard-earned relief. We did it together, Commander. I do not believe this outcome would have been possible without your efforts on our behalf. You give me too much credit, I reply honestly. Your people's strength and patience earned this outcome. I simply helped create the space necessary for that strength to be properly recognized. She studies me for a long moment, something warm and genuine passing behind her tired eyes. Regardless of how the credit is divided, Commander, I find myself deeply grateful for your presence throughout this entire journey. Few among your people would have extended the same understanding and support you have shown us." Her words settle warmly into my chest, and for the first time since this entire situation began, I allow myself a genuine smile. Perhaps it is time the rest of the galaxy learned to extend that same understanding more freely, Captain. Your people have certainly earned it. As our conversation draws to a close, I turn back to my bridge, watching the human fleet settle into a calmer, steadier formation, now that the immediate threat of conflict has finally passed. Yet even amid this hard-won relief, I understand clearly that provisional recognition marks only the beginning of a much longer, more complicated journey toward full integration and lasting peace between our civilizations. The galaxy has changed permanently, reshaped by 40 years of quiet, determined resilience, culminating in a return capable of forcing even the most stubborn, fearful factions to acknowledge humanity's rightful place among the stars. And as I settle back into my chair, watching the steady lights of the Requiem holding formation at the heart of its fleet, I find myself deeply curious and cautiously hopeful about exactly what challenges and opportunities await us all as this new, uncertain chapter of galactic history continues to unfold. Provisional recognition brings a fragile kind of calm to the sector, though I quickly learn that calm and peace are not always the same thing. Within days of the announcement, my duties shift again, this time toward coordinating the logistics of humanity's gradual integration into assembly infrastructure, a task far more complicated than any battle plan I have ever drafted during my years of service. Captain Hallow requests my presence aboard the Requiem directly for the first time since her fleet's arrival, and I find myself surprisingly nervous as my shuttle approaches the massive vessel, its hull marked with decades of quiet, determined survival. I have grown accustomed to speaking with her through screens and channels, but stepping aboard her ship in person feels like crossing into a world I have only glimpsed secondhand until now. The interior of the Requiem surprises me immediately. I expected sleek, advanced corridors reflecting the fleet's impressive technological capabilities. Yet instead, I find something far more personal. Walls lined with handwritten records, small personal items clearly passed down through generations, and a warmth to the design that speaks less of military efficiency and more of a people determined to preserve their humanity, quite literally, throughout decades of isolation and hardship. Captain Hallow greets me personally at the docking bay, her expression open and welcoming in a way that feels different from our previous exchanges. "Commander Thren, welcome aboard the Requiem. I confess I am glad to finally host this conversation in person, rather than across a screen." "As am I, Captain," I reply honestly, glancing around the corridor with genuine curiosity. "Your ship carries far more history than I anticipated." She smiles faintly, leading me deeper into the vessel. "Every wall you see holds a story, Commander. We made a point of preserving our history physically, refusing to let technology alone define our identity. Screens can fail, data can be lost, but a name carved into metal, a photograph carefully preserved, those things carry weight that survives even the harshest circumstances." As we walk, she points out small details. A section of wall dedicated to the names of every crew member born during the earliest, hardest years within the Hollow. A small garden maintained meticulously despite limited resources. A quiet reminder of the homeworld many aboard have never personally seen. Each detail deepens my understanding of exactly how deeply humanity's resilience runs, woven not just into their technology, but into every aspect of their culture and daily life. We eventually arrive at a private meeting room, simple and functional like the rest of the ship, where Captain Hallow gestures for me to sit, before taking her own seat across from me. "I asked you here personally, Commander, because our Fleet Council believes it is time to discuss deeper cooperation between our peoples, beyond simple diplomatic recognition." Her words catch my attention immediately. "What kind of cooperation are you proposing?" "Knowledge exchange," she answers directly. "Our technological advancement, born from necessity and isolation, could benefit the wider assembly significantly. In return, we hope to gain deeper understanding of assembly culture, history, and governance, areas where our own knowledge remains limited due to decades of complete separation." I consider her proposal carefully, understanding both its potential benefits and its inherent risks. Such an exchange would require significant trust from both sides, Captain. Certain factions within the Assembly remain deeply wary of your fleet's capabilities. Sharing that level of advanced technology could reignite fears we only recently managed to calm. I understand the risk, she replies evenly, but continued isolation, even peaceful isolation, ultimately benefits no one. If we are to build a lasting partnership rather than a fragile truce, genuine cooperation must eventually replace cautious suspicion. Her reasoning resonates deeply with my own hopes for the future, and I find myself nodding slowly in agreement. I will present your proposal to Assembly Command, though I suspect progress will be gradual rather than immediate. Gradual progress is still progress, Commander, she replies with a small, genuine smile. We have learned patience far better than most civilizations ever have to. Over the following weeks, I find myself increasingly involved in coordinating this delicate exchange, mediating between cautious Assembly scientists, eager to understand humanity's remarkable technological leaps, and equally cautious human engineers, protective of knowledge earned through decades of hardship and sacrifice. Progress remains slow, careful, and occasionally frustrating, yet steady enough to inspire genuine hope for a future built on cooperation rather than fear. During this period, I also find myself spending increasing amounts of personal time aboard the Requiem, drawn not simply by professional obligation, but by genuine curiosity about the culture and people who managed to build something so remarkable from such devastating circumstances. I meet Nathaniel Cross's granddaughter, a brilliant young engineer named Claire, who inherited both her grandfather's technical brilliance and his quiet, determined humility. I meet Eleanor Voss's great-grandson, a soft-spoken medical officer named Peter, who continues his ancestors' legacy of innovative healing practices developed under impossible circumstances. Each conversation deepens my understanding of humanity's culture, revealing layers of resilience, creativity, and quiet strength that no official report could ever fully capture. I begin to understand that humanity's 40 years of isolation did not simply produce advanced technology and a powerful fleet. It produced an entire civilization built upon values of cooperation, sacrifice, and unwavering determination, values that I find myself increasingly admiring the more time I spend among them. Captain Hallow and I continue our own conversations throughout this period as well, our professional partnership deepening steadily into genuine friendship, built upon mutual respect and shared curiosity. During one particularly quiet evening, shared over a simple meal within her private quarters aboard the Requiem, she shares something with me that settles deeply into my understanding of exactly who she is beneath her calm, composed exterior, as fleet captain. "Do you know why I chose to become captain, Commander?" she asks quietly, studying the simple meal before her rather than meeting my gaze directly. It was never about power or authority. It was about responsibility. My grandmother often told me that leadership within the Hollow was never about commanding others, but about carrying the weight of their survival on your own shoulders, so they could focus entirely on building a future worth surviving for. Her words settle heavily and warmly within my chest, and I find myself understanding, more deeply than ever before, exactly what kind of leadership guided her people successfully, through 40 years of isolation and hardship. "Your grandmother sounds like she was a remarkable person, Captain." "She was," Grace replies softly, a small, fond smile touching her lips. She often said that hope without action was simply wishful thinking, and that real hope required sacrifice, discipline, and an unshakable commitment to those depending on you. I have tried to honor that lesson every single day since taking command of this fleet. Her quiet vulnerability in that moment deepens my respect and admiration for her significantly, and I find myself sharing more openly in return, speaking about my own struggles navigating command responsibilities, about the weight of decisions made during moments of extreme uncertainty, about the quiet loneliness that often accompanies positions of significant authority. Our conversation continues late into the evening, moving fluidly between lighter topics and deeper reflections, and by the time I finally return to my own ship, I find myself carrying a renewed sense of purpose and connection that extends far beyond simple diplomatic obligation. Our peoples, despite vastly different histories and experiences, share far more common ground than either of us initially expected, bound together by shared values of resilience, sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to building a better future, despite whatever obstacles stand in the way. Yet even as these deeper connections continue strengthening steadily between our peoples, I remain acutely aware that significant challenges still lie ahead. Certain factions within the Assembly continue harboring quiet suspicion regarding humanity's rapid technological advancement, and rumors occasionally surface suggesting some among these factions have not entirely abandoned earlier fears regarding the potential threat such capability represents to the traditional balance of galactic power. I share these lingering concerns with Captain Hallow during one of our regular coordination meetings, and her expression grows thoughtful and measured as she considers the implications carefully. Fear rarely disappears entirely, Commander. It simply learns to wait quietly for the right opportunity to resurface. We must remain vigilant, even as we continue building genuine trust and cooperation wherever possible. Her words prove prophetic sooner than either of us anticipated, as within days, new reports begin surfacing suggesting a previously unknown faction, operating largely outside official assembly channels, has taken significant interest in humanity's fleet, though not necessarily for reasons aligned with peaceful diplomacy or cooperative partnership. I received the initial report during a late evening briefing, Doran's expression notably tense as he presents the limited information currently available. Commander, our intelligence sources indicate unusual activity from an independent faction operating near the outer boundaries of Assembly territory. Early reports suggest this faction may be attempting to acquire human technology through less than diplomatic means. My earlier sense of cautious optimism shifts immediately into renewed concern as I process the implications of this new, unexpected threat. Do we have any further details regarding this faction's identity or intentions? Limited information currently, Commander, Doran replies, though preliminary intelligence suggests they may possess resources and capabilities significant enough to attempt direct action against human interests, potentially without official assembly sanction or knowledge. I immediately contact Captain Hallow, sharing this troubling new development, and her expression grows notably serious as she absorbs the implications carefully. An independent faction, seeking our technology through unauthorized means, she repeats slowly. This complicates matters significantly, Commander. Agreed, I reply, my earlier optimism now tempered considerably by this unexpected new threat. I recommend increased security measures immediately, alongside continued efforts to gather further intelligence regarding this faction's true identity and intentions. I concur, Captain Hallow replies firmly. We did not survive 40 years of isolation, only to lose everything we built to opportunistic exploitation, now that we have finally returned home. As our conversation concludes, I find myself staring thoughtfully at the steady lights of the human fleet, visible through my viewport, understanding clearly that whatever fragile peace we have managed to build over these past weeks now faces a significant new test, one that will likely determine not only the security of humanity's hard-won recognition, but potentially the broader stability of the entire galactic community moving forward. I settle back into my chair, mind already racing through potential strategies and precautions, fully aware that the coming days will require every ounce of skill, patience, and determination both our peoples have worked so hard to demonstrate throughout this entire remarkable, unprecedented journey. The following days pass in a blur of intelligence gathering, security coordination, and mounting tension as fragments of information slowly assemble into a clearer picture of the faction, now taking a dangerous interest in humanity's fleet. I work closely with Doran and my intelligence officers, cross-referencing every available report, while maintaining constant communication with Captain Hallow and her own security teams aboard the Requiem. It is Claire, Nathaniel Cross's granddaughter, who ultimately provides the breakthrough we desperately need. During a joint technical meeting focused on shared engineering concerns, she approaches me privately afterward, her expression troubled and hesitant. Commander Thren, may I speak with you regarding something unrelated to our official meeting? Of course, I reply, immediately sensing the seriousness behind her request. She glances around cautiously before continuing, her voice lowered despite the relative privacy of our surroundings. I have been monitoring unusual signal patterns near our fleet's outer perimeter, patterns that do not match any known assembly or independent trade vessel signatures currently registered within our combined databases. I believe someone has been quietly observing our fleet's movements and capabilities for several weeks now, likely gathering detailed intelligence in preparation for something far more significant than simple curiosity. Her revelation sends a fresh wave of concern through me, and I immediately request access to the data she has gathered, cross-referencing it carefully against our own intelligence reports. The patterns she identifies align disturbingly well with fragmented reports my own officers have been struggling to piece together, suggesting a coordinated, patient effort by an unknown faction determined to understand humanity's technological capabilities before making their next move. I share this combined intelligence immediately with Captain Hallow, and together we convene an emergency joint council meeting involving senior officers from both our fleets, determined to develop a coordinated strategy before this unknown threat has the opportunity to act on whatever intentions they currently harbor. Based on the patterns identified, I explained to the assembled officers, human and Kalith alike gathered together for the first time in such significant numbers. This faction appears highly organized, patient, and technologically sophisticated enough to avoid detection for several weeks, despite our combined security efforts. This suggests resources and capabilities beyond what typical independent factions within this region normally possess. Captain Hallow nods grimly, adding her own assessment to the discussion. Our engineering teams have identified subtle anomalies within our internal systems as well, suggesting this faction may have already attempted limited infiltration efforts, likely testing our defenses in preparation for a more significant action. The revelation sends a ripple of concern through the assembled officers, and I watch as expressions shift from cautious concern toward genuine alarm. Do we have any indication regarding this faction's ultimate goals? One of my senior tactical officers asks, voicing the question clearly weighing heavily on everyone's mind. Based on available evidence, Captain Hallow replies carefully, their primary interest appears focused on acquiring detailed technical specifications regarding our fleet's advanced propulsion and defensive systems, likely intending to either replicate this technology independently or sell it to other interested parties, operating outside official assembly oversight. Her assessment aligns with my own growing suspicions, and I find myself increasingly concerned about the broader implications should such advanced technology fall into the wrong hands, particularly hands operating entirely outside the careful diplomatic framework we have worked so hard to establish over these past several months. We need to identify this faction's base of operations quickly, I say firmly, addressing the assembled officers with renewed determination. The longer they remain unidentified, the greater the risk they pose, both to humanity's security and to the broader stability we have worked so hard to achieve within this sector. Over the following days, our combined intelligence teams worked tirelessly, cross-referencing every available data point, tracing subtle signal patterns back toward their source, with painstaking precision. It is during this intensive investigation that I find myself working increasingly closely alongside Claire, whose technical brilliance proves invaluable in identifying patterns my own officers initially overlooked. You have quite the gift for this kind of analysis, I tell her during one particularly late evening session, both of us reviewing data late into the night aboard the Requiem's primary command center. She offers a tired but genuine smile in response. My grandfather always said that survival within the Hollow depended on paying attention to details others might overlook. I suppose that lesson stuck with me more than I initially realized. Our conversation shifts naturally into lighter territory as we continue working, and I find myself appreciating not only her technical skill, but her quiet resilience and thoughtful perspective, qualities clearly inherited from the remarkable legacy her grandfather helped establish decades earlier. Through our continued collaboration, I gain even deeper insight into the culture and values that guided humanity successfully through their prolonged isolation, insight that only strengthens my growing respect and admiration for their remarkable journey. Our combined efforts eventually yield the breakthrough we so desperately need. Careful analysis of subtle signal patterns ultimately traces the mysterious faction's activities back toward a hidden outpost located within a poorly monitored region along the Assembly's outer boundaries, an area historically overlooked precisely because of its remote, resource-poor conditions. I immediately convene another joint council meeting, presenting our findings alongside Captain Hallow and our respective intelligence teams. Based on our combined analysis, I explain to the assembled officers, The faction responsible for this ongoing surveillance appears to operate from a hidden outpost located within this remote sector, historically overlooked by standard assembly patrols due to its resource scarcity and general strategic insignificance. An oversight this faction has clearly exploited to their advantage, Captain Hallow adds grimly. Question now becomes how best to address this threat while minimizing risk of unnecessary escalation or conflict. The Council debates various strategic options extensively, weighing the benefits and risks of direct confrontation against more cautious, diplomatic approaches designed to expose and neutralize the threat without triggering open conflict. Ultimately, we agree upon a carefully coordinated joint operation, combining Calith diplomatic authority with humanity's advanced technological capabilities, designed to approach the hidden outpost cautiously, gather definitive evidence regarding the faction's true intentions, and ultimately present formal charges through official assembly channels, rather than risking unnecessary bloodshed through direct military confrontation. This approach carries significant risk, I acknowledge honestly, during our final strategic discussion. Should this faction possess resources or allies we have not yet identified, our carefully planned diplomatic approach could quickly escalate into something far more dangerous. A risk we must accept, Captain Hallow replies firmly, given the far greater danger posed by allowing this faction to continue operating unchecked, potentially destabilizing the fragile peace we have worked so hard to establish. With our strategy finalized, preparations begin immediately for what promises to be among the most delicate and high-stakes operations either of our fleets has undertaken since humanity's dramatic return. I find myself personally selected to lead the joint diplomatic delegation, working alongside Captain Hallow herself, given our established relationship and mutual understanding, developed through months of close collaboration. As our small delegation prepares for departure, Captain Hallow approaches me privately, her expression carrying a seriousness I have rarely witnessed from her throughout our growing friendship. Commander, I want you to understand something before we proceed with this mission. My people have faced significant hardship and uncertainty throughout our entire existence within the Hollow. We have learned to face danger directly, without hesitation, when the safety and future of our people depend upon it. I understand, Captain, I reply firmly. And you should understand that Calith honor demands the same unwavering commitment when the stability and safety of allies we deeply respect and value hang in the balance. She studies me carefully for a long moment, something warm and appreciative passing behind her steady gaze. Thank you, Commander. Your continued support throughout this entire journey has meant more to myself and my people than words can adequately express. Her genuine gratitude settles warmly within my chest, strengthening my own resolve as we finalize preparations for departure. As our delegation's shuttle finally leaves the safety of our combined fleet, venturing cautiously toward the remote, hidden outpost responsible for weeks of unsettling surveillance and unknown intentions, I find myself acutely aware that whatever awaits us within that isolated sector will likely determine not only the immediate safety of our combined fleets, but potentially the broader trajectory of humanity's continued integration within the wider galactic community. I glance briefly toward Captain Hallow, seated calmly beside me despite the significant uncertainty and danger awaiting us, and I find myself drawing quiet strength from her steady, determined presence. Whatever challenges lie ahead, I understand clearly that our combined resolve, forged through months of genuine cooperation, mutual respect, and shared determination, represents exactly the kind of unity necessary to successfully navigate whatever dangers this hidden faction ultimately intends to pose against the fragile, hard-won peace we have worked so diligently to establish. Our shuttle approaches the hidden outpost slowly, sensors sweeping continuously for any sign of hostile intent as the remote structure gradually resolves into view against the dark backdrop of unclaimed space. The outpost itself appears deceptively modest from a distance, a cluster of aging modules connected by narrow corridors. Yet, as we draw closer, my sensors detect subtle indicators of significant hidden capability: reinforced shielding, concealed weapon emplacements, and power signatures far exceeding what such a modest-looking structure should reasonably require. They have invested considerable resources into disguising their true capabilities, Captain Hallow observes quietly beside me, her own tactical display confirming similar findings. Agreed, I reply, tension coiling tightly through my chest as we continue our cautious approach. Whoever operates this outpost clearly anticipated the possibility of unwelcome scrutiny. We proceed carefully, according to our established plan, broadcasting formal diplomatic identification codes as we approach, hoping to establish contact through official channels before any potential misunderstanding has the opportunity to escalate into open conflict. For several tense moments, no response arrives, the silence stretching uncomfortably as our shuttle continues its slow, deliberate approach toward the outpost's primary docking structure. Finally, a response arrives, gruff and clearly cautious. Unidentified shuttle, you are entering restricted space. State your business immediately or withdraw. I exchange a brief glance with Captain Hallow before responding carefully. This is Commander Vecker Thren of the Calith Border Watch, accompanied by Captain Grace Hallow, representing the human fleet. We seek peaceful dialogue regarding recent surveillance activity directed toward our combined fleets. We request permission to dock and discuss this matter directly. Another tense silence follows before the voice responds again, notably more guarded than before. Dialogue is unnecessary. Withdraw immediately. We are aware of your recent attempts to gather sensitive technical information regarding human fleet capabilities. I continue firmly, refusing to be easily dismissed. We would prefer resolving this matter through peaceful diplomatic means, rather than escalating toward unnecessary conflict. Please reconsider our request for direct dialogue. The silence that follows stretches even longer this time, and I begin to genuinely worry that our diplomatic approach may ultimately fail, potentially forcing a far more dangerous confrontation than either of our fleets originally intended. Yet finally, the voice responds once more, tension clearly evident despite the attempt at composure. Very well. Proceed to Docking Bay 3. Weapons remain deactivated, or this conversation ends immediately. We comply carefully, guiding our shuttle toward the designated docking bay, both of us remaining alert and cautious, despite our commitment to a peaceful diplomatic resolution. As we exit our shuttle, we are greeted by a small delegation, led by a weathered, cautious-looking individual, who introduces himself simply as Director Voss, offering no further identifying information regarding his species or organizational affiliation. You have caused quite a stir within our operations, Commander, Director Voss says, his tone carefully neutral despite obvious underlying tension. Few possess the resources or courage necessary to trace our activities this precisely. We are not interested in conflict, Director, I reply evenly. We simply seek understanding regarding your organization's recent interest in human fleet capabilities, and hopefully, a peaceful resolution that avoids unnecessary escalation for all parties involved. Voss studies us both carefully, clearly weighing his next words with considerable caution. Our organization represents several independent factions who remain deeply concerned regarding the rapid, unchecked expansion of human technological capability. We fear such advancement, left unchecked, poses significant long-term risk to the traditional balance of power carefully maintained across this region for generations. Captain Hallow steps forward slightly, her tone calm but firm as she responds directly to his concerns. Director, our people did not spend 40 years struggling for survival within isolation, simply to threaten the stability of a galaxy we hope sincerely to rejoin peacefully. Our technological advancement emerged purely from necessity, not aggression or expansionist ambition. Perhaps, Voss replies cautiously, though intentions can shift significantly once capability reaches a certain threshold, Captain. History has taught many civilizations, including my own, that unchecked power inevitably invites eventual consequence, regardless of initial intention. His words carry a weight of genuine, deeply rooted fear, rather than simple hostility, and I find myself understanding, at least partially, the underlying motivation driving his organization's cautious, secretive actions. Director, I say carefully, rather than continuing covert surveillance and potential unauthorized technological acquisition, would your organization consider engaging directly with official assembly channels? Transparent dialogue seems far more likely to address your concerns effectively than continued secrecy, which only risks further escalating tensions unnecessarily. Voss considers my proposal carefully, clearly torn between deeply ingrained caution and genuine desire for a peaceful resolution. Transparency requires trust, Commander. something in short supply given recent galactic developments. Trust must begin somewhere, Director, Captain Hallow adds gently. We are offering that opportunity now, freely, and without preconditions. Continued secrecy and covert action will only ever deepen suspicion and conflict, never resolve it. A long silence follows as Voss considers our words carefully, clearly wrestling internally with decades of ingrained caution against the genuine possibility of a peaceful, transparent resolution. Finally, he nods slowly, his expression shifting subtly toward cautious acceptance. Very well, I will bring your proposal before our organization's leadership. I cannot guarantee immediate acceptance, but I am willing to advocate for transparent dialogue moving forward, provided your combined fleets demonstrate genuine good faith throughout this process. You have our word, I reply firmly, relief washing quietly through me as our careful diplomatic approach finally begins yielding tangible progress. Over the following hours, careful negotiations continue, gradually establishing a framework for transparent dialogue between Voss's previously covert organization and official assembly channels, with humanity's fleet playing an active, cooperative role throughout the process. Though significant work remains before genuine trust can be fully established, the immediate threat of unauthorized technological acquisition and potential covert conflict appears successfully averted through patient, determined diplomacy. As our delegation finally prepares to depart the hidden outpost, Director Voss approaches us once more, his earlier caution now tempered by cautious optimism. I confess, Commander, Captain, I did not expect this outcome when your shuttle first approached our outpost. Perhaps genuine cooperation remains possible after all, despite the significant uncertainty currently facing our galaxy. Cooperation always remains possible, Director, Captain Hallow replies warmly, provided both parties remain genuinely willing to pursue understanding over fear. As our shuttle finally departs the hidden outpost, beginning our journey back toward our combined fleets, I find myself reflecting deeply on everything accomplished throughout this tense, uncertain mission. What began as a potentially catastrophic threat to the fragile peace we worked so hard to establish has instead transformed into another meaningful step toward genuine understanding and cooperation between previously fearful, suspicious factions. Captain Hallow turns toward me as our shuttle continues its steady journey homeward, her expression thoughtful and quietly satisfied. You handled that situation remarkably well, Commander. Your diplomatic instincts proved invaluable throughout this entire encounter. As did yours, Captain, I reply honestly. Your calm, steady presence throughout our negotiations played no small part in convincing Director Voss to reconsider his organization's previously entrenched position. She smiles warmly in response, and for a brief, quiet moment, the weight of our shared responsibility seems to ease slightly, replaced instead by genuine satisfaction at having successfully navigated yet another significant challenge together. Yet even as this particular threat resolves peacefully, I remain acutely aware that our journey toward lasting, stable integration between our civilizations remains far from complete, with numerous challenges and uncertainties still likely awaiting us both in the days and months ahead. As our shuttle finally rejoins our combined fleet, greeted by visibly relieved officers eager for news regarding our mission's outcome, I find myself carrying forward a renewed sense of hope and determination, strengthened significantly by everything accomplished throughout this remarkable, unprecedented journey. Whatever challenges continue awaiting us, I remain confident that the deep respect, understanding, and genuine partnership established between our peoples throughout these past several months provides a solid, unshakable foundation capable of successfully navigating whatever obstacles the future ultimately holds in store for us all. News of our successful mission spreads quickly throughout both fleets, and in the days that follow, I sense a noticeable shift in the broader atmosphere surrounding humanity's continued integration within the assembly. Delegates who once viewed our combined efforts with quiet suspicion now approach negotiations with renewed openness, and even the most cautious factions begin acknowledging, however reluctantly, that humanity's return represents an opportunity for genuine partnership, rather than an unavoidable threat requiring constant vigilance and fear. Ambassador Sennett requests a formal meeting shortly after our return, her expression carrying a warmth I have not previously witnessed during our earlier, more guarded interactions. Commander Thren, Captain Hallow, I want to personally commend you both for your handling of this recent situation. Your combined efforts have done more to advance genuine trust between our peoples than months of formal negotiation ever managed to achieve. We simply did what circumstances required, Ambassador, Captain Hallow replies modestly, though I can see quiet pride reflected clearly behind her calm expression. Modesty aside, Senate continues warmly, the Assembly Council has reviewed your recent actions carefully, and I am pleased to inform you both that formal proceedings have already begun toward granting humanity full recognition as a permanent governing power within our council, well ahead of the original probationary timeline. Her announcement sends a wave of quiet relief and genuine joy through me, and I glance toward Captain Hallow, whose own expression reflects similar emotion despite her practiced composure. That is wonderful news, Ambassador, I reply, unable to fully suppress the warmth evident in my own voice. Indeed, Senate agrees, though I suspect much of this progress owes itself directly to the deep partnership and mutual respect you both have worked so diligently to establish between our peoples throughout these past several months. As our meeting concludes and Ambassador Senate departs, Captain Hallow turns toward me, her expression softening into something warmer and more personal than our usual professional exchanges typically allow. Commander, I do not believe I have properly thanked you for everything you have done throughout this entire journey, not simply as a diplomatic partner, but as a genuine friend to myself and my people. Her words settle warmly and deeply within my chest, and I find myself responding with equal sincerity. Captain, working alongside you and witnessing firsthand the incredible resilience and strength of your people has been among the greatest honors of my entire career. I only hope our continued partnership proves as meaningful to your people as it has already become to me personally. She studies me for a long, quiet moment, something gentle and appreciative passing behind her steady gaze. It already has, Commander, more than you likely realize. In the weeks that follow, formal recognition proceedings continue steadily, and I find myself increasingly involved in shaping the framework for humanity's permanent integration within Assembly governance, working closely alongside Captain Hallow and her senior officers throughout this historic, unprecedented process. Claire and Peter, along with numerous other young human officers whose families endured decades of hardship within the Hollow, begin taking on increasingly prominent roles within these negotiations as well. Their fresh perspectives and deep personal understanding of their people's remarkable history, proving invaluable throughout the ongoing integration process. During one particularly significant meeting, held aboard the Requiem to mark the formal conclusion of the extended integration framework, Captain Hallow addresses both human and Assembly representatives gathered together, her voice carrying quiet pride and genuine gratitude as she reflects on the remarkable journey that brought them to this historic moment. 40 years ago, 12 people entered a rift with no guarantee of survival, let alone return, she begins, her gaze sweeping thoughtfully across the assembled crowd. We built an entire civilization from nothing but determination, sacrifice, and an unwavering belief that giving up was simply never an option worth considering. Today, we stand not as strangers returning to a galaxy that once dismissed us, but as genuine partners, welcomed fully and completely into a community we are proud to finally call home once again. Her words are met with genuine applause from both human and Assembly representatives alike, and I find myself deeply moved by the significance of this historic moment, understanding clearly that we are witnessing the culmination of an extraordinary journey built upon resilience, sacrifice, and ultimately, genuine understanding between civilizations that once viewed each other with quiet suspicion and fear. As the formal ceremony concludes and celebrations begin aboard the Requiem, Captain Hallow approaches me once more, her expression relaxed and genuinely joyful in a way I have rarely witnessed throughout our months of careful, often tense diplomatic collaboration. Commander, would you care to join me for a quiet moment away from the celebrations? There is something I would like to share with you privately. Curious, I follow her toward a quiet observation deck overlooking the combined fleets now stationed peacefully together. Human and Calith vessels finally united, not through fear or cautious suspicion, but through genuine partnership and mutual respect, earned through months of shared struggle and determined cooperation. I wanted to share this view with you specifically, Commander, she says softly, gazing out at the peaceful formation of ships stretching before us. When my ancestors first entered that rift 40 years ago, They could never have imagined this outcome. An entire fleet built from nothing, ultimately welcomed home, not as conquerors or outsiders, but as genuine partners within a community we once feared had abandoned us entirely. Your people's journey is truly remarkable, Captain, I reply honestly, deeply moved by the quiet significance of the moment we now share together. I feel genuinely privileged to have played even a small part in helping guide that journey towards such a meaningful, historic conclusion. She turns toward me, her expression warm and sincere. Your part was far from small, Commander. Without your understanding, patience, and genuine friendship throughout this entire journey, I sincerely doubt our integration would have proceeded nearly as smoothly or peacefully as it ultimately has. Her words settle deeply and warmly within me, and for a quiet moment, we simply stand together, watching our combined fleets rest peacefully side by side, a powerful, unmistakable symbol of everything achieved through patience, resilience, and genuine cooperation between two civilizations who once viewed each other with quiet uncertainty and fear. What comes next for your people, Captain? I ask eventually, genuinely curious about the future now unfolding before humanity, following their historic, hard-won return. She considers the question thoughtfully before responding. Rebuilding connections with the wider galaxy, certainly, but also honoring everything we learned and became throughout our time within the Hollow. We do not wish to simply return to who we once were before our disappearance. We wish to carry forward the resilience, unity, and determination that ultimately allowed us to survive and thrive, despite impossible circumstances, using those same values to help build a stronger, more united galaxy moving forward. Her vision resonates deeply within me, and I find myself genuinely excited about the possibilities such a partnership promises for both our civilizations moving forward. I believe your people's journey offers valuable lessons for the entire assembly, Captain. Resilience, unity, and unwavering determination in the face of impossible circumstances are qualities every civilization could benefit from embracing more fully. She smiles warmly, clearly moved by my genuine admiration and respect. Perhaps this is only the beginning of an even greater journey then, Commander. One built not simply on humanity's return, but on genuine partnership and mutual growth between all the diverse peoples who call this galaxy home. As our quiet conversation draws gently to a close, we return together toward the ongoing celebrations, joining human and assembly representatives alike in commemorating not simply humanity's historic return, but the beginning of a new era defined by genuine cooperation, mutual respect, and shared determination to build a stronger, more united future together. Looking back now on everything that unfolded since that first alarm tore through my command deck months earlier, I understand clearly that humanity's return was never truly the galaxy's nightmare so many initially feared it would become. It was instead a powerful, undeniable reminder of exactly what resilience, unity, and unwavering determination can accomplish, even when faced with circumstances that once seemed utterly impossible to overcome. As I watch the combined fleets resting peacefully together beneath the quiet backdrop of open space, humanity and assembly alike finally united in genuine partnership rather than fear, I find myself deeply grateful for every challenge faced, every difficult conversation navigated, and every quiet moment of understanding shared throughout this extraordinary journey. Whatever challenges the future ultimately holds for our newly united civilizations, I remain confident that the foundation of resilience, respect, and genuine partnership we have worked so diligently to establish together will guide us successfully through whatever lies ahead, transforming what once seemed like an unavoidable nightmare into the beginning of an entirely new, hopeful chapter for our shared galaxy.